Holla ballers, it's Preacher, and as we've seen, people are crumbling under the power of Mythic and Mythic Plus. How hard is it? What item level do you need? How do I do it? Ghosty?
900 item level, mate.
The Mythic Plus system, ladies and gents. I hope you're all having a tremendous day, but we probably know and did prepare for in the beta. The Mythic and Mythic Plus system is supposed to be a brand new way for people who hate raiding to team up with a few friends and have a progression system that is absolutely viable. That's who this system is targeted at, okay? Has that paid off? Has it had a good start? These are all good questions. Is this the reality of what we're seeing? Or is this another heroic scenario situation, which is this content's kind of okay, but it's not really fulfilling the needs it was designed for because it just doesn't work out that way in reality. I praised this system on the beta. Why? The community on the beta and the alpha naturally fell into order, where they were trying desperately to stick to this item level sort of engorging system where it's asking for absurd item levels. But the problem was, and it was a good problem, is that people who were at a certain item level felt, and understandably so, that the mythic dungeons were set for a specific level for them. So if you were of a higher item level, then anything lower than, say, a 5 was a waste of time for you, right? You weren't going to be in there. And what this created was a natural system that fell into place where the lower geared guys were naturally coordinated to go towards Mythic 2, Mythic 3, and the higher guys, they were pushed into the higher item level. So people couldn't say, I want 860 for the key level 2. Because 860 guys would be running 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and all the way up to the nightmare that is 10 currently, based on our current gear levels in game right now. So what's the flaws? Let's talk about the flaws that we've had so far. Firstly, the idea that is intentional. We've got to remember, Ion actually said this was totally intentional, is that you could spam mythic dungeons for gear. I personally believe that you should be item locked from keystones where you got gear from. So let's give the example. If you run a keystone level 2 and you do it with a very high level gear, you're going to get 3 chests. That's because your keystone automatically jumps up to like level 5. So for me, that should mean that you are item locked from keystone level 2, 3, and 4. The reason I say that is we've had a very bad start to the system for many of the people this system is targeted at. That's what I want you to be bearing in mind here. Who is targeted for this system? What we saw is because you are not item locked, and the intentional idea of you being able to spam these dungeons for gear has led to, of course, raiders boosting people who had no business being in certain levels of dungeons yet but had access to a mythic keystone through them so they could take their loot, essentially, so they could access their loot. So you probably saw it on your server. I'd be absolutely astonished if you didn't, where raid groups were boosting everybody's and consuming, basically sucking up all the level 2 keystones on the server, sometimes even paying people to bring their level 2. And then what we actually saw on our server, which is a very busy raid server, is after a few hours, they had to bump it up to level 4. And they were saying, we will take anything from level 4 because we can boost you through that. We can get all the chests at a level 4 because we find that relatively easy in our gear and our experience in PvE in order to get all the chests at level 4 as well. Of course, if you've done the Mythic Plus system, you'll know once you start hitting 7, things get a little bit fucking wacky in there when you start getting one-shotted by various abilities. So what this means is a vast majority of the people who this system is targeted at have been left with a keystone that is far too high for them to do anything with. Or even worse, which is a natural and historical precedent, is a keystone for a dungeon that nobody wants to run, because they find it too hard, too difficult. There are always going to be dungeons that are seemingly easier than others or quicker than others. So if you're left with, I don't know, let's say you got boosted, which many people did, and now you're left with, say, a level 6 or a level 7 Vault of the Wardens, perhaps, or an Archway, or a Court of Stars, then nobody who is appropriately geared with you, who's at your item level and skill level, wants to do that with you. So you're kind of stuck with this until your keystone naturally degrades back down to a normal 1. Now that will eventually resolve itself, which is fine, but for now you're kind of fucked. And you're the guys who this is targeted at, which is a bit of a piss poor start in my eyes. But I'm not going to have that much sympathy because you absolutely got boosted through content that you had no business being in, and you still collected all the rewards for that, including all the artifact power that went along with that, which is, again, another problem, is that the Mythic Plus system is absolutely the most efficient way of farming artifact power, which means, again, raiders attempted to do that. The problem, of course, now then, is raiders are raiding. Mythic is out. It's already been cleared as of this morning. I'm reshooting this video from yesterday. And they have no fucking interest whatsoever in trying to get people to take them through Mythic Dungeons. They're starting to take people's alts, so they're just not bothering at all at this point, because they're geared as much as they could possibly be from sucking up all the consumables on the server from the previous week. So for a lot of people, this system has a bad taste in their mouth. We also have to give shouts out to the people who are just unable to get a Mythic group at all. With the community fucking itself over. This, again, is a byproduct, isn't it, of the fact that Keystone Level 2, which is very, very simple. If you can do Mythic at all, if you can do Mythic 0, which hopefully most of you can because they're very, very simple, if you can do Mythic 2, then that's it. You're kind of stuck there now, right? You're kind of stuck there in this world and unable to do much about anything once that. But because you're a DPSer, if you got unlucky with drops, I can speak from experience here that I have had many, many, many Mythic Plus drops all the way up to 10 and have equipped basically nothing, right? Basically nothing. Which is a real shame because the stats are bad. You might have an high item level, but it's your stats are bad and your character's actually worse off for equipping them. Even with taking 3 clothies like we do, then you're generally fucked. Even with trading all the loot, you can't really get any benefit out of there whatsoever. Not to mention the crazy system of being able to trade items that have a higher item level. Some sort of newbie protection, I'm guessing they're going for there. Very, very strange that people can't choose to trade items as if they're going to be bullied into passing it over. Perhaps Blizzard was afraid of that, I don't know. Or they're just trying to reinforce the idea that item level over everything. I'd love to see your thoughts on why this system is in game, because it's very, very fucking unusual. What this all leads to then is the Mythic Plus system is, for me so far, and I'm hoping and I'm praying, as I said, I did praise this system on the beta because it does work, is right now generally a burden for raiders and a really off-putting system for the people it's actually targeted at. The people it's targeted at who are hopefully going to avoid raiding because they can't do it and occasionally log in and do some Mythic, and they'll be able to gear their characters, which was apparently a huge problem in Walls of Draenor for the casual player base, is that all real progression was locked behind raiding. Blizzard's come up with this system. They said, hey, look, here's a system where you can just do a 5-man. That's not too much to ask in an MMO, we don't believe. Where you can find guilds. Hopefully, a lot of people, we did the cesspool video last week, are falling out of that system and finding guilds that actually have a purpose and a task, and that might be Mythic Dungeons, it might be some normal raiding eventually. But you should be able to find people with which you can actually go ahead and have some regular progression with that doesn't involve many hours of raiding. It might be a 20-minute Mythic Plus or something like that. All these sort of false starts to the system have really soured the taste for a lot of people. I'm getting plenty of emails and huge amounts of forum threads posted daily about, one, the word Mythic giving the impression that this is somehow elitist content or this is hardcore content, and seeing Mythic 0 referred to as hardcore is a very baffling thing to see. That's really crazy. So, of course, Mythic Plus is very difficult to put into the minds of these guys as well, that Mythic Plus isn't hardcore content, which is totally unsuitable for those people who feel they're not good enough. Yeah, we see this all the time. A lot of people who don't raid actually feel they're not good enough and don't want to be shouted at and avoid this, or maybe social anxiety issues, whatever it might be. Although I will never be of the opinion that Blizzard should design much of the game around the single-player experience. It is an MMO anyway. The last thing I think is going to be very difficult, and perhaps we're not even going to get over this, and this is what I really want you guys to be talking about in the comments, if at all possible, is there's a concept with Mythic Dungeons that I think a vast majority of the player base is going to really struggle with. And that is the fact that you are designed to fail. The Mythic Plus system is designed that at some stage you will inevitably fail. You will fall down on your ass. Now, a lot of things play into this, and maybe now the player base can kind of understand why Blizzard doesn't design raids around lesser and less people in terms of numbers, because once you get to lower numbers, class balance becomes a major problem. If you've got major trash man deeps, like my man Ghosty on his Demon Hunter, what up?
What up, mate?
And Fire Mage, you're going to have a much easier time than some of the other classes that are just not trash man deeps, right? Because most of the problems in Mythic Plus are, of course, Trashman Deeps. And if you don't have good Trashman Deeps, you're pretty fucked, which is why lower-end raids don't really work if you start reducing the numbers too small. So hopefully they pick that up. But getting back to the point at hand then, which is the idea that you were designed to fail. As you will no doubt be unimaginably so clearly aware that a wipe in World of Warcraft for a huge majority of people is the worst thing that could ever happen. Even in something as trivial as LFR, once you wipe, people just abandon ship because everybody is a fucking noob. They can't handle the fucking failure. It wasn't their fault. We all know that. It was absolutely everyone else's fault because they're all shitlords and scrubs and they listen to Linkin Park on repeat and they abandon ship. Now you're putting those guys who see a wipe as an absolute disaster into a system that is inevitably going to cause them to fail. And how will that play out over the course of this expansion? Blizzard's making some really good moves in trying to bring communities back together. The dissolving of the cesspool guilds and making them completely irrelevant now, and giving people this option of just finding a few friends or a few regulars who they can run a 5-man with and get decent quality gear, hopefully, if the drops are right. They can do that now. But they're asking them to also change their entire mentality of World of Warcraft from what they've known since the day they literally bought the game. It doesn't matter if you bought it in Warlords of Draenor or you bought it in Vanilla, is that you're entering into a system that is inevitably going to crush you into the fucking ground. So if you reach level 10 and you've got, say, teaming and skittish and fortification, like we had last week on the EU servers, or you've got necrotic like we've got this week, Jesus fuck. This is all stuff that raiders know how to deal with because they've dealt with similar things before. But some of it is very, very complex. Timing the stuns absolutely perfectly to reset necrotic stacks, have the tank kite, doing perfectly timed slows, saving slows, being able to stop these mobs doing things, especially when things get much more difficult, while still maintaining the interrupts and all the other stuff that is required of you inside these dungeons. This is pretty complex stuff. I'm glad it's in there. I'm glad it's in there. I'm glad it's teaching people to consider outside of the box thinking. You might look at things like my Fire Mage video where I said there's occasions to use things like Blast Wave and people lost their mind because it's a deeps loss. Necrotic and Blast Wave ain't the end of the fucking world, mate, let me tell you. Having that on-demand AoE slow ain't bad. Ain't fucking bad when it's on a short cooldown if your tank is tanking something with a shitload of mobs that are all stacking Necrotic on him and he needs to reset pretty regularly. So all these things add up to a system that, one, is much more complex in many ways than you're going to find in normal Emerald Nightmare. That's for damn sure. Once you start reaching 8, 9 of the Mythic dungeons, you're really going to have to start doing things as a team. That's a great thing. Will the player base be able to pick up on that? Will the player base be able to handle a system that is designed to beat them at some point and be able to have the moxie and the stones and the fucking bukkake to get their ass back in there the next week? Once they get that cash, they get them extra gears, they get their extra item levels or whatever it might be to go in stronger. Or are they going to say, what we're seeing, this is the big question, are they going to say, what is it? Blackrock Hold, not doing it. Don't care what level it is, not doing it. Not doing Neltharian's Lair with teaming because them guys with the jagged discs at level 7 will wreck your face completely. Are they going to just say, no, 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 and I only want to run more of Souls 2 from now until the end of the expansion, and then complain to Blizzard that this is unacceptable behavior? As we do know your gear does go with that, will they hit a natural stumbling block? And therefore, the system hasn't worked, and it's now a failure, and it's basically become a thing that raiders do. That's the big fear, I think, for this system, is it just becomes a thing that raiders do in order to get their weekly cachet, and that's about it. Where everyone else is, once again, item locked, and this time not because of accessibility, because the content is there to be done, but because it doesn't meet their specific requirements. I can't queue for it, people are bad, I don't like it, I don't want to make friends, I don't want to find a guild that does anything really. If you look at the forums of everybody who complains about Mythic Plus Dungeons, you're going to see every single one of them is fucking gilded. So if you're one of those guys, I absolutely beg and plead with you, please, please find a guild. I implore you with everything in me to do that, because you are wasting money. If you are sat in Dalaran or Orgrimmar and you're trying to use the pre-made group and you're just getting rejected because of item level, and then you're like, I can't get the item level because I can't get the mythic, and you feel like you're in this trap where you can't get what's needed and therefore you're inevitably just constantly falling behind. The answer is out there for you guys, and this system does work. It really does. What I'm hoping to see over the next few weeks as things sort of settle down is that people start finding these natural barriers to entry, and therefore also finding other people who are in their similar level, as we saw in the alpha and the beta. This is exactly what we saw. I really hope Blizzard rethinks the idea that you can just spam the lower level dungeons for the quick artifact power and the gear, which is going to just lock people down there, down below. It would be nice to see that. I would also really appreciate if some people could reset their keystone. If people want to go all the way to, say, a 7 in some basic gear with a reasonable team, but the next week they want to start again, I'm not sure if this system is in place. I don't think it is. I don't think you can reset your keystone. I know my group tried to do it and it didn't work. I would hope that they allow people to do that so they can start fresh and maybe have another week at gear, because that's their progression system. Similar to how raiding works. You clear everything up and then you get to redo it again next week. That would be a better system in my eyes. Let me see your thoughts, guys. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.